Good morning. Good to see you all today. We have a lot of ground to cover, so I want to make sure that everyone has a copy of the printout I made. Does everyone have this? I did this. I know you know how to find your way through the Bible. This is not a judgment on anyone. It's just that when we're covering so much material, I just thought this would make it a little easier. And then if I have someone to read, they could just look at the next passage and read. Okay? Yes. Now, I personally, I love to see your Bibles, and I love to hear the pages turning. I'm old school like that. It takes me all the way back to the pre-digital age where now people, you don't know if they're on Facebook or reading their Bible. You assume the best. But anyhow, I like that you have the hard, the Bible that you can feel, the analog Bible, as they say, that you could have in your hand. So anyhow, we're going to be working from these printouts, and so keep them handy. There are page numbers at the bottom, so if you feel like you get your pages shuffled, I can say, oh, no, we're on page 1. That will be the only page turning today. Okay? Okay. Let us begin with prayer, as we always do, and I want to invite you, if you're willing and able, to join me in praying. The Lord be with you. O everlasting God, who hast ordained and constituted the services of angels and men in a wonderful order, mercifully grant that as thy holy angels always do thee service in heaven, so by thy appointment they may succor, assist, support, and defend us on earth, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Okay. So this is what we've done so far. We've looked at angels and our experience, angels and archangels. We looked at their creation and their order and saw that they're organized into choirs or classes. Last week we looked at angels in the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible. And today we will look at angels in the prophets and psalms. And when we say prophets and psalms, you might be surprised that we're beginning in 2 Kings when we say prophets. Well, we're doing that because so many prophets appeared in the earlier writings. So we tend to think of the prophets as the big prophets, Isaiah, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, and then the minor prophets, Amos, Obadiah, and such. But there's more to the prophetic writings than that. And so that's why we'll be looking in 2 Kings today. Okay? And then we're going to look at angels in the New Testament next week, and we'll look at a few things in the Gospels, the book of Acts, and the epistles. Seems pretty ambitious, but we'll do what we can. Then we'll look at angels in the book of Revelation, and that will help tie together many, many of the stories and other passages that we will have already seen by the time we get there. And then on March 16th, we will devote an entire session to the angel of the Lord. So some of you have asked, well, why haven't we looked at a story in Joshua, for example, or why not this story in 1 Kings, or why not a story in, you name the place. Well, it's because the most prominent angel in the Old Testament is the angel of the Lord. And he is a mysterious figure that can only be understood in light of Jesus Christ. And so we'll go and look at the angel of the Lord, and you'll see some really interesting things about him when he appears, what he does when he shows up. And then you'll see the fulfillment of all of that typology, all of that imagery in the New Testament when you get to Jesus. Okay, so that'll be on March 16th. And on March 23rd, we will wrap up this session of studies by looking at angels in the Book of Common Prayer. And once you put something like this on someone's radar, and then they're doing the daily offices or they're listening in the liturgy of Holy Communion, all of a sudden you start to see and hear things that have always been there. They didn't just show up because we we started talking about angels, but then you go, oh, wow, it's right there in front of me, okay? And the scriptures are that way. So some of you have commented to me that you've read the Bible over and over again, but now you're starting to notice details in the Bible, like these angels and archangels and other creatures, okay? And that's the way it ought to be. So that's why it's so much fun to go back through the scriptures again and again, because we just go layer upon layer. It's so deep. You know, I usually botch this up, but some people will say of the scriptures that they're shallow enough that an infant can play in them, right? But they're deep enough that an elephant or a whale can swim in them, you know. It's both and so that's where we are. And that's why, as I try to catechize you, I want you to learn this. The deeper you go, the weirder life gets. This is the movie poster I was telling you about. The deeper you go, the weirder life gets. Well, it's true in the scriptures too. The deeper you go, the weirder it gets. And that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. Okay. So we're going to look at some of that today. Okay.
Can I just tell them about the coin?
Yes, please.
I was reading in I went and think the date, but it was George Herbert, famous poet from England, and in it he refers to the gold, and he shouldn't pay, hang on to all of his gold. It's time for him to give an angel away. Angel with a capital A refers to the gold coins. That's what they called them back then. When? So he was writing in what, the
1800s? Late 1500s.
1500s.
Did they have a picture of an angel?
It wasn't in the poem. It just struck me in the poem. I went, and
Yeah.
It was angel. I said, I gave my last angel away.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought that was so cool.
Yeah.
When we get to angels in the Book of Common Prayer, I'm going to share with you a poem by George Herbert that talks about angels and archangels and many other things. Okay, it's a beautiful poem, and I think you'll all appreciate it in light of our study. So I'm holding off on that. Okay, and maybe we can find the one you're referencing and share it as well. Okay, all right. All right, you ready for this? I think we're going to have some fun today. All right. So first things first, this is an image. It's a very old piece of art. It's from around the 1200s. It's from the medieval period. And this is a depiction of Elijah and the chariots and the horses of fire and his mantle that he's handing to Elisha, okay, which is what we're going to read today. But I thought you would appreciate the artistry of this, that there are so many scenes and stories in the scriptures that our forefathers took effort to paint, embroider, carve, sculpt, whatever, and we still get to see them. They're in churches all around the world, and so this is one. Okay.
You know, there was a movie, Chariots of Fire.
Yes. Yeah. It's about an Olympian.
Yes.
What was his name? Eric.
Little.
Yeah, Eric Liddell. Uh-huh. Yes, he said, famously said, "When I run, I feel God's pleasure."
Yes.
Yeah. It's beautiful. Okay, 2 Kings chapter 2, verse 1, and then 9 through 12. Just a volunteer to read that. This is on page 1 of your printout. And feel free to write notes on this. These are yours to keep. I don't need them back. I want you to have them. Okay. Okay. Can I get a volunteer to read that top section? Yes. Thank you.
Now, when the Lord was about to take Elijah up to heaven by a whirlwind, Elijah and Elisha were on their way from Gilgal. When they had crossed, Elijah said to Elisha, "Ask what I shall do for you before I am taken from you." And Elisha said, "Please let there be a double portion of your spirit on me." And he said, "You have asked a hard thing. Yet if you see me as I am being taken from you, it shall be so for you. But if you do not see me, it shall not be so. And as they still went on and talked, behold, chariots of fire and horses of fire separated the two of them. And Elijah went up by a whirlwind into heaven. And Elisha saw it, and he cried, my father, the chariots of Israel and its horsemen. And he saw him no more.
Now, in context, on several occasions, Elijah told Elisha, stay here. So they would travel a little bit and he'd say, stay here. And Elisha just kept going. So he's persevering. And he's persevering. And so he finally gets down to this, what shall I do for you before I'm taken away? Elijah knows that he is about to be taken away. He knows his time has come. So the request is bold. What is the request? What does Elisha ask? A double portion of your spirit. So he already holds him in high esteem. He sees what the Lord has been doing in his life and ministry for Israel. And now he is going to continue that on. And so he wants this double portion of the Spirit. This is a kind of ordination story. So if you ask, where does ordination come from in the church? It comes from various places. The priesthood, for example, of how Aaron, the high priest, became priest, or Moses became a prophet. But it's also in stories like this, where one person is laying hands on or passing something down to another person. Okay, so this is a kind of ordination story, if you will. These two were leading the school of the prophets. And so you'll find later as you read the story that Elisha is actually going to take over the school of the prophets. That's also the roots of what we call monasteries and that kind of thing. The idea of that came from stories like this, where men would devote themselves to study and prayer and live together in a cohort or community, and somebody would lead them. An abbot would lead them. An abbot is a fancy way to say a father would lead them. Why father? Well, roots of that are also seen in this story. What does Elisha call Elijah? My father, my father. Okay. My father, my father. He was his spiritual father. And so there are a lot of interesting things in this story that little rabbit trails we could follow. But for our purpose today, we are focused on the phrases that I put in bold. So look at the word whirlwind. Hold on to that word because it will come up again in the next couple of stories we'll look at. And then what do you make of these other images? Chariots of fire and horses of fire. Why would we highlight them in the context of our study of angels? Doesn't call them angels, does it? So
makes you think of the seraphim,
Uh-huh.
fire.
Yeah, seraphim were the burning ones, the fiery creatures. So there's that imagery that kind of makes us tilt that way. Anything else?
They're kind of in the other world with angels.
They're in, yes.
We don't see them.
They're in the unseen world, and then all of a sudden they appear. Okay, and that makes us think. Okay, there's invisible, unseen creature out there, or these creatures. When you see chariots and horses in that context, what are we talking about? Like Cinderella story, or are these military images? Warfare. Yeah, this is military. Okay, it's not like this cute little buggy pulled up and then Elijah hopped in and they went trotting off. Okay, it's not a ride through New Orleans or anything like that. No, this is there's something powerful and glorious about this revelation of these creatures, chariots of fire and horses of fire. Now, why do you think fire? Tell me some things you know about fire. What does fire do?
Put
Cleanses the refiner's fire.
Fire can cleanse, it can refine,
Burns out the
purify,
past.
burns out the past. I love that. Yes. What else does fire do? It gives you light, heat. What? It also destroys, doesn't it? It can be used as a kind of judgment. It can deliver and it can destroy. Right? Fire can do a wide range of things here. So very good. So keep that in mind. If you were in Elisha's sandals and you're watching your father as you walk along, he says, you better keep your eyes on me or you're going to miss it. So you're watching him, and then all of a sudden this other thing happens. How do you think you might have responded? Yeah. I mean, there's no wrong answer. It's how you might have responded,
Might want to save him from that.
Yeah, you might have been scared at first, like, whoa, what just happened? It can be disorienting, but that's not his response, other than to say, my father, my father. Now, why would he say that?
Maybe he thinks he's going to be destroyed.
I think he thinks he's scared for him. And he's scared for himself because he could lose his father, which he did.
Yeah.
So this is a startling moment. And that's what I want you to see. It's consistent with what we see in other stories where angelic creatures appear. When they show up, it's never like, oh, hey, what's up? No, when they show up, people feel like falling to pieces. Okay. They can't take it. So this happens, apparently it happens very quickly. Elijah is taken up by a whirlwind into heaven. So you have a combination of things here. Earth, wind, and fire. Not to be confused with the band, right? But it is, in a sense, it's very elemental, but it's also very spiritual. Okay? So the thing that we learned in the Catholic tradition is that God works through means. God is not ashamed or embarrassed to work through his creation. He often works through material means to accomplish spiritual ends. Okay? In fact, that's the ordinary way he does things. So he's not ashamed of things that are physical and tangible. The Eucharist is right there to remind us. Baptism is right there to remind us. And then we have each other. Right? We have each other. We are body, soul, image bearers, and God works through us for the sake of each other. Right? So God works by means of all sorts of things, and we see that here: fire, horses, chariots, wind, and just because something is spiritual doesn't mean it's less real. Okay? So let me ask you this: we need to save that for the next story. But I just want you to have this in your mind. Just because something is spiritual does not mean it's less real. In fact, it's more real. Okay, but it doesn't mean that if it's physical and material that it's less real. Like, we're real. This is not ghosts. We're not phantoms. The material world is a real thing. It's not an illusion. Okay. So that's the first story to set us up for what's about to come. Okay. So what does Elisha receive in this moment? Does he get what he asked for?
Double spirit. Yeah.
Yes, he does. And we know that because he kept his eyes on his father, and when his father was taken away, he received what his father promised. And a sign of that is the mantle that Elijah was wearing, okay? His cloak, in other words. And so what does Elisha do? If you were to read the context, he picks it up and he brings it with him. When he goes to cross the water, here's the first test. Touches the water with the garment, the water parts, and then he goes on his way. Okay? It's an incredible story. Now, fast forward a few chapters in 2 Kings. Now we're in chapter 6. This is at the bottom of page 1 on your printout. Can I get a volunteer to read this story?
And the servant of the man of God rose early in the morning and went out, behold, an army with horses and chariots was all around the city. And the servant said, Alas, my master, what shall we do? He said, Do not be afraid, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them. Then Elisha prayed and said, O Lord, please open his eyes that he may see. So the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha.
Okay. Thank you, Jan. So in this story, you have the prophet and his servant in a city that is under siege. How does the servant feel when he looks out and he sees the armies of the enemy surrounding the city? He's terrified, okay? He's terrified. And so with his naked eyes, he sees horses and chariots all around the city. What kind of horses and chariots does he see initially, early in the morning? Yeah, the natural material ones that we're used to seeing, or if you lived in their day, that you would be accustomed to seeing in warfare. So that's what he sees. And they're obviously outnumbered. Things have not been going well in the context of the story. Things have not been going well in Israel. And so he is right to be concerned. There's no judgment for him saying, oh man, look at all of that. Alas, my master, what shall we do? Indeed, what shall we do? And we learn something here about our own life, don't we? Because there are often moments in life when something, analogous to armies of horses and chariots seem to be pressing upon us. So you could look at your individual life and whatever that looks like to you. I'm saying just by analogy, it could be the onslaught of the enemy in your life. Maybe you're facing some kind of spiritual struggle and the devil's trying to bring you down. You could also look at physical distress. You get a diagnosis that's terrible for you or your loved ones, and now you start to feel that. And this question comes up, alas, my Lord, what shall we do? What shall we do? Okay, we've all been there. And we could multiply the examples, okay? So I'm not saying that you have to wait until your city is surrounded by an enemy army to offer this kind of cry or this kind of prayer or ask this kind of question. I'm simply saying that we've all been in places where we feel utterly surrounded and helpless to do anything about our circumstances. Okay? There's nothing we can do. We know that we're going to be overwhelmed. We can see, we can't really see the future, but in our imagination, we see what's about to happen. That's where this servant is. If this army moves against us, we are powerless to defend ourselves. We are going to die here. That's why he says, alas. Woe. Not woe like, whoa, that's so cool, but woe like, woe is me, right? Alas, what shall we do? There's a kind of anxiety behind this question, right? So you've all been there, right? You felt it, okay? And you might even be there today. We could talk about it. We could pray about it. But my point is, the prophet has the right response. And I want you to hear this in the most pastoral way you can. The master is speaking to the servant. Do not be afraid. He's not shaming him for being afraid, right? And you've had people do that to you, where they have like this cocksure faith, this sort of nothing can affect them, and they think it's ridiculous that you feel any fear. That's not what the prophet is doing. Do not be afraid. Why? Yeah. Well, before that, what is the reason he gives? Do not be afraid, for
Those who are with us are more than
yeah. So if you were the servant, now you know the rest of the story, pretend you don't, but if you were the servant and your eyes have not yet been opened, you might be tempted to think, Elisha's losing it. He's starting to see things that aren't here.
You see what I see?
Because if you're the servant, you just look back off of the wall and say, I don't see that many of us. Okay? And that's often how we are, is we know we should walk by faith and not by sight, but how do we end up walking most of the time? I end up walking by sight more times than by faith. So if you're like me, then join the club. If not, then show us the way forward, okay? But most of us tend to walk by sight and not by faith, at least initially. That might be our initial knee-jerk reaction to any set of circumstances. Like in that moment, we forget to walk by faith. The first thing is like, oh dear, this is going to be bad. Okay, that's what's happening here. What does this servant need?
His eyes open.
He needs his eyes opened, and in order for that to happen, he needs prayer. Okay, so that's what I'm impressing upon you. This is the first thing we need. Is we could say, we went to our priest or our pastor with this concern. That's a really good move, and I want to urge you all to do that. Not because your priest or your pastor has all of the answers, but because God has put them there for your sake, okay? And sometimes it's just a matter of having someone who is anchored to say, hey, let's take this to the Lord. So, and that's what the prophet does. He says to his servant, hey, don't be afraid. So here's some counsel, pastoral counsel. Here's the gospel truth. Those who are with us are more than those who are with them. So you need a minister to remind you of the gospel. And then you need a minister to pray for you. Pray with you. Okay? And what is the prayer here? Isn't that interesting? He doesn't say, take away his fear, solve all the problems, resolve all the questions. He doesn't do that. By saying open his eyes, what is he actually praying? Some of you have already hinted at this.
Open my eyes so I can see what you're seeing.
Yeah, open his eyes so he can see what I see. And what do we call that kind of sight? He's already used his physical eyes, and he can see the armies. Now he needs spiritual insight, doesn't he? He needs faith to see the unseen, to remember that there's more going on than meets the eye. That's the prayer, okay? And it's not even, notice the prayer is not even open his eyes so that he can see what I see. Open his eyes so that he can see, okay? So this is a foreshadow of Jesus opening the eyes of the blind. When you get to that, where Jesus will be opening the eyes of the blind, it goes back to this kind of story as well. O Lord, open his eyes so that he may see. This is a sign of a really good minister, by the way, that the minister, you've come to him, he's heard your cry, he's given you counsel, he's reminded you of the gospel, he's praying for you. And what does he do in the prayer? He takes you all the way to the Lord. Notice he doesn't take the servant to himself. I got this. Let me show you. No, let's bring this to the Lord in prayer. Lord, you do your work in his life. Open his eyes that he may see. That's the petition. Does the Lord answer the prayer? Yes. He opens the eyes of the young man, and what does the young man see? Yeah. Now think about that. The mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire. Where? All around Elisha.
All around the city.
So I want you to think about that. I'm not quite sure what to do with that, but I'm just tying this story back to the first one we saw. In the first one, it looks like the horses and chariots of fire sweep Elijah away, and then they go away. Now what do we see? They've never left the prophet. So as he's moving through life, what are these horses and chariots of fire doing? They're protecting him. They're encircling him. They're all around him. And he knows that. And he wants the servant to see that. Isn't that amazing? Now, it says that the mountain was full. So that leads us to think two things. It should. One is we might think of a physical mountain outside the city, or maybe the city is near a mountain or on a mountain. So it could be that kind of mountain. Or, and I'm just throwing this out as a possibility, or it could be the mountain of the Lord. Mount Zion, the unseen mountain of God upon which he dwells, that the prophet who is a part of the divine council, he's a part of this, these people that are brought in to this special place to be a part of God's council. Maybe that's part of what is hinted at here, okay? But the point is, however we take it, the point is these horses and chariots of fire never leave. Now, I was trying to imagine what that might have looked like to the servant. And this is the best I could come up with, okay? Now, this is the scene. This is a forest fire, or I'm sorry, this is a wildfire scene that was taking place in California a year or so ago. But the reason I selected this one is because you have in the front, there's no fire, but then there's fire around it. And I thought, I wonder if it looks sort of like that to the servant when he looked out and he could finally see beyond the armies and chariots and horses of the enemy, if he could see beyond that to, oh, those who are with us are more than those who are with them. Okay? So that's a part of seeing the unseen as we walk by faith. Okay? Now, that's just one idea of what it might have looked like. Okay, any questions about that story? Yes.
Before we move on, when you were a missionary in another country, did you ever feel surrounded by the enemy? Or did you always feel?
Yes, but I would say, here's what happened in my case, and I'll keep this brief. When my family and I lived in Louisiana, right before we moved down to South Mexico, I experienced a wide range of things. I couldn't get over some sickness. There were all kinds of things happening that were inexplicable to me. And a friend of our family asked my wife, she said, do you guys believe in spiritual warfare? You know, she wasn't quite sure given our tradition at the time. And that really sparked some conversation. It made us realize, oh, we're not alone in this. Like there are enemies trying to prevent us from doing things. Yeah. So yes, I felt that before we moved. And then when we got there, because in the area where we lived, there was so much superstition, witchcraft, that sort of thing. Like our kids were going to tutoring and we found out the tutor had a mother who was a witch and she's practicing witchcraft. I mean, it sounds like, you know, she's painted black and wearing horns, but she wasn't. She looked, you know, she was dressed normally like all of you, but she had these cures and spells and things that she would use to try to heal other people. So in her mind, she was doing good works, but she was using demonic forces to do so. Not that she knew that, but I mean, that's what she was. She was a witch. Yeah. Yeah. And so that was eye-opening to us that, you know, there's a semantic range of what witch is. It could be a witch, it could be a healer, it could be, fortune teller. But yes, we felt that. And I realized it doesn't matter where you go in the world. All of that's really happening. It's just that you kind of get lulled into a drowsiness up here where you don't think about it as much. But I'm very well aware of it now. I just wake up in the day assuming the devil's going to try to kill me today. Well, he's trying to kill you as well. I mean, no, but I'm serious. He has that level of malice and hatred. So this is why we need to be reminded that those who are with us are more than those who are with them. Like this is a real thing. And so I think once we kind of get on guard for that, we start to pay attention more to different kinds of influences and tendencies, and then we can help each other better, right? Because we are engaged in this. So yeah, good question. Thank you.
Can I share just a brief thing? I mean, talk about in your community. So I'm teaching at Rockwell High School, and I had created a new course on world religions. So I'm saving Christianity to the end.
Mhm.
And James Dobson had said, you know, you can talk about Christ, etc., because you're talking about Muhammad. Long story short. So they all have projects, and this one young man says, I would like to do something on Revelation. And I'm like, oh, okay. Okay. And I called my daughters and I said, I don't know what's going on, but you need to pray on this. After the guy gives his presentation, everybody walks out. Ooh, this gives me goosebumps. Everybody walks out, but this girl at the back of the deal, who had always been real quiet and causing no trouble, all of a sudden this voice comes out of her. How dare you?
Oh my goodness.
How dare you show them the truth?
Mm.
And I'm sitting there going, and I'm looking at the doors open, thank goodness. And she starts moving toward me. And she said, how dare you? And her hair's just, you know, this voice is coming out of her. Anyway, you know what I did? Well, I had been in the mission field a little bit, but I had watched Blackula too. And so, I put up my hand. And I said, who are you?
Oh,
And
wow.
she tells me her name, and she was half man, half goat. And anyway, her her boyfriend had seen her hoof prints on the beach when they went to the beach, and I'm like, so I'm doing this, and the more I did this, then I got braver, and I started moving toward her, and then she couldn't look at me. Just by doing this.
Making the sign of the cross.
Making the sign of the cross. And I said, who are you? And I said, in the name of Jesus Christ, you will be eternally condemned. You know, I mean, I'm just doing this. Everybody's going to lunch. Here I am fighting the devil right there. And then she just catered, you know, as I got, you will be eternally condemned. And she leaves. I go down to the nurse's office and I collapse on the bed. I said, what am I dealing with? Is she on drugs? Da, da, da. They said, she comes in here every day to sleep because her mother channels spirits over her every night.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's real. Okay, sorry, but
Well, no, and this is right. This is a good example. Like, you don't have to go to a third world country to encounter this. It's right here in our neighborhood.
I was going to say, you said you were in Louisiana. I thought, well, you don't have to go to
Well, I'd like to share a story that happened to my son. There's two stories.
Okay.
When he was in college, his girlfriend called and said, Edward does not want to go into his apartment, and he lives on campus.
Excuse me, when you tell your story, could you speak up?
Well, I'll try. I don't say it very loud. Doreen will tell you.
yeah, it's very loud.
In college, I think it was his junior year, Stephanie called and said, Edward will not go into his apartment. And I said, he needs you to come here. We were visiting him for some parent weekend. And I said, what's wrong? He said, I opened the door and a man on fire ran across the room into my bedroom, you know, the living room to my bedroom. And I walked in, I said, I don't see anything. I said, I saw a man on fire run across into my room. I'm not going in there. And I always carried holy water in my car. So I went and got the holy water and blessed his whole apartment.
Ooh. All right.
So
So it's got very real all of a sudden, didn't it? Yeah.
I had some friends who lived in Austin, and it's a new area where everybody's building houses. So they wanted to go see this gal who's so famous. I can't remember her name, but she was a wonderful artist. And anyway, she was building a different house, and so we walked over there to see it. And when you walk through, and it was under construction, so you walk through the door, and there were very few walls up or anything, but there was an enormous staircase, like from that wall to that wall almost. It was just huge, like in a castle or something. And So everybody started going up the one, so it was upstairs. So I walked up about 3 or 4 steps, and I froze, and I was feeling like I'm gonna fall. I can't move. I don't know. And later I met her, and I told her about visiting the house. I said, but I couldn't see it all because I was going up the staircase, and something stopped me, and I was just absolutely terrified. And I just had to turn around and walk outside. I just kept my mouth shut and saying anything. She said, oh, well, I had to have an exorcism done on that house. So that's why we never finished it. And, so I was like, this was scary. There's no doubt about it.
Well, thank you for that. Well, class dismissed.
Yes, I have a quick story.
All right.
The missionary told a story about some people who usually tried to attack him and were enemies. They were like in Africa or something. They came up and said, we want to know your God. And then he said, why? So, well, we were going to attack you, and there are all these chariots and angels and fire around protecting you. We want to know about a God that does that.
Yeah.
So God uses those in good things too.
Yeah.
And this works.
Yeah. Truly, you know, if you read the literature and experience on this sort of thing, this sort of spiritual warfare, sign of the cross and the name of Jesus Christ are powerful weapons that God has given us. Prayer, we always pray. We call on the angels to help us. These are important things, and it keeps us rooted and grounded in the truth of who God is. Like it's important for us to know, and when we read these stories, that we cannot say, that was then, this is now. Oh, if only I'd been, you know, with Elisha and his servant, then I could have seen the unseen. No, it's not that was then, this is now. We're living in the same world, the same cosmos they were in, and these same realities are present. So, and you're all, you know, you're sharing stories along the way, and maybe some things are starting to click and make sense of what you've actually experienced, okay? Now, to tie some things together, we've seen a couple of stories that dealt with chariots and horses of fire. We might wonder, who are those creatures? Where would they fit? If you remember back to our first or second session, where we talked about the choirs of angels, the order of angels. Remember, we had the higher they are, the closer they are to the throne of God. That's seraphim and cherubim. And then the lower ones are closer to man. Those are the angels and archangels. And then we have these middle, remember, thrones, dominions, powers. I think that's where these chariots and horsemen fit. They fit in that middle section as well, where they're going back and forth because they're taking people from the earth up into heaven, that sort of thing. Okay? But we learn something else about them as we read in the prophets. So there are two places we'll look at. One is in Zechariah. The other is in Daniel. So if you'll look on page 2 of your printout, we'll look at the passage in Zechariah first. It's also up here for you. There's another beautiful icon that's depicting this scene, okay, with these horses. In context, the prophet is receiving this vision from God, and visions reveal things to the prophet. So they don't always reveal the future, you know, like tell me what's going to happen day after tomorrow. It's not always like that. It's a vision is revealed, and then the vision needs to be interpreted because it's so symbolic and sacramental that you're like, you wonder, like, what do I do with all of this? Okay. The prophet asked this question when he sees these horses. He says, "What are these, my Lord?" And the angel who talked to me said, "I will show you what they are." Okay. So keep in mind what we have here. We've got horses, which we've been looking at, fiery horses. Now we've got horses again. But we also have a prophet. He's a man made in the image and likeness of God. And who else? An angel. Okay. There's a lot going on just in this one sentence. Okay. There's a lot happening here. So the prophet is in conversation with an angel. The angel who talked with me says, I will show you what they are. So the man who was standing among the myrtle trees, now there's this other mysterious figure, and what in the world is a myrtle tree? It gives me chills when I hear the word myrtle tree, because I just imagine like something out of Narnia or Middle Earth, and I don't know, is it going to start talking or moving? But a man standing among the myrtle trees, okay? These are they whom the Lord sent to do what? Ooh, to patrol the earth, yes. And they answered the angel of the Lord. So now, another person is here, the angel of the Lord. They answered the angel of the Lord who was standing among the myrtle trees. Now we know who that man was. And said, we have patrolled the earth, and behold, all the earth remains at rest. Okay?
It's okay.
So these four, these horses, if you keep reading in that chapter, you're going to find out that these horses all have different colors. They all do certain things. They have specific mission and purpose. You're going to see these horses again. They will show up again in what book, if you know? In the book of Revelation. In the late 70s, when I was a little kid, my mother worked at Town East Mall. She managed an Indian art store. It's all turquoise and things out of New Mexico. It was great hanging out over there. And then I would sneak off to one of the stores. I think it was Spencer's Gifts or something like that. Probably shouldn't have been in there as a little kid, but I do remember that was my introduction to the four horsemen of the apocalypse, because they had a poster, and I always wanted that poster. It terrified me and fascinated me at the same time. I didn't know it came out of the Bible until much later. But this is the roots of the four horsemen of the apocalypse. We first see them here in Zechariah in a clear way. We actually saw them in 2 Kings, but now we're seeing them in a clear way in the prophet, and you're going to see them even more clearly in the book of Revelation, where you find out that they're going to do all kinds of things. They're not just patrolling the earth, checking things out. They check things out and then they take action. So sometimes they're going to bring military conquest. Sometimes they're going to bring famine and pestilence on the earth. Sometimes they're going to shake up economies. Sometimes they're going to bring death. Okay, so that's what these creatures are doing. These four creatures. Okay, so they're patrolling. Just keep that in mind. That what in the midst of everything else we're looking at, there are these four angels, these four creatures that patrol the earth at all times. Now, that's happening even now. Okay? They're wild horses. They could be. Always patrolling. Yeah. Now go to Daniel, the next reading. Okay? The next reading. By the way, this is a tapestry from the medieval age describing those four horses. Okay? I think this is from, I think this one is from 1205 or something like that. Okay? But it's really interesting.
Those dead people on the bottom.
Yes, I think these are people who have suffered or been afflicted by these creatures. Okay? Either rescued or killed. Okay. All right. In Daniel 4, the printout is longer than what's up here, but I highlighted the key points. Could I get someone to read Daniel 4:13 to 17?
I saw in the visions of my head as I lay in bed, and behold, a watcher, a holy one, came down from heaven. He proclaimed aloud and said thus, chop down the tree and lop off its branches, strip off its leaves and scatter its fruit. Let the beasts flee from under it and the birds from its branches. But leave the stump of its roots in the earth, bound with a band of iron and bronze amid the tender grass of the field. Let him be wet with the dew of heaven,
Let his portion be with the beasts and the grass of the earth. Let his mind be changed from a man's, and let a beast's mind be given to him. And let 7 periods of time pass over him. The sentence is by the decree of the watchers, the decision by the word of the holy ones, to the end that the living may know that the Most High rules the kingdom of men and gives it to whom he will and sets over it the lowliest of men.
Whoa.
That's quite a vision, isn't it? Okay. Now, in this vision, who does the prophet see? In in verse 13, what's it called? A watcher, a holy one. Now, I'm not sure if we know whether a watcher is the same as a patroller. All right, one of those that patrols. They could be related, could be the same thing, could be a distinct role that this Holy One is performing. Okay, so the difference is this: a patroller moves around. So the 4 that we saw in Zechariah move around. Okay, what does a watcher do? Typically, if you're on watch, what do?
You're stationary and you're focused.
Yes, you stand at a post, you're alert, you're paying attention to a specific area. Okay, I tend to think they're different, but they're doing something similar. They're paying attention to what's happening around them.
Need both.
You need both. Now, it's called a holy one. Again, we're studying angels. They're not called angels, but what else would this be? Okay, they're angelic creatures of some sort. Where did it come from? It came down from heaven. Okay, so when it comes down from heaven, then it begins to declare something. It's talking about chopping down a tree, lopping off branches, stripping off leaves, scatter fruit, etc. This is about someone and their kingdom. Do you remember who it is? Nebuchadnezzar, yeah. Nebuchadnezzar and Babylon. That's who this vision is about. Now, it has to be interpreted for the prophet, right? You can have dreams, as Daniel had said. You have dreams, but the interpretation comes from God, not from your best friend, not from the internet or Reddit or Facebook. Hey, what do y'all think about this dream I had? And then everybody weighs in. Okay. The dream comes and it has to be interpreted. So what is being described here is Nebuchadnezzar and his kingdom. The focus is going to come to Nebuchadnezzar because his portion will be with the beasts. He will be wet with the dew of heaven. His mind will be changed, right? Who is declaring all of this to the prophet? The Holy One, the watcher is, okay? He's bringing the message to the prophet. Okay, and this is very important for us to see, because sometimes we think of, everyone just has like this direct and immediate access to God. Well, in some ways we do, but in other ways we don't. Because again, God works through means. And here he's working by means of a messenger called a watcher or a holy one that brings the message to the prophet about someone else. Okay? And now look at verse 17. This is crucial for our purposes today. The sentence, now he's not referring to grammar, he's talking about the judgment, okay? The sentence, this judgment, is by decree of the watchers. Oh, now we know there's more than one watcher. The decision by the word of the holy ones. So now you see that these angelic creatures, these watchers and holy ones, whoever they are somehow involved in the judgment of God. They're not judging God, but they're executing his judgment. They're bringing the message and they're doing the work. Okay? So when we see Nebuchadnezzar later on, when we see Nebuchadnezzar go down, we see his kingdom stripped from him and given to the Medes and the Persians, we can't just say, well, it was a weird sort of, socioeconomic forces, political turmoil, material circumstance. Behind all of that, we'd have to say the angels, the holy ones, the watchers, they brought him down. They executed that judgment to bring him to his knees. Okay? So they're involved in that. Now, what is the end goal? It tells us what is the end goal of this judgment.
Break up his kingdom.
Well, just no. Read. Yeah, it will break up his kingdom. It will do all sorts of things. But like in terms of ultimate goal, what does? Yeah. Yes. To the end that the living may know that the Most High rules the kingdom of men and gives it to whom he will and sets over it the lowliness of men. Okay? So God's ultimate purpose here in bringing this judgment is so that the world will know that he is the true and living God, that he is the real king. He's the true Lord. And those other kings are just vassal kings. They're under him. The nations are all his to do what he wants. Okay? And sometimes we forget that. We forget that. I'll remind you of one of the first stories we looked at was Isaiah in the temple. And do you remember the time frame that Isaiah mentions?
The year that King Uzziah died?
Yeah, in the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord. Okay? And that's an important thing because what Isaiah is learning there is that as great as that king was, as good and righteous as that king was, he was not the Lord. And I don't know about you. I mean, I don't want to call anyone out, but I've heard and I've seen on social media that some people idolize their political leaders. Have you noticed that? Have you ever seen that happen? It can happen. They treat them like, these godlike figures, like they have these godlike powers until the Lord takes them down. Okay? And we need to be reminded that, yes, men serve purposes. Nebuchadnezzar, by the way, served some incredible purposes of God. But when he put himself in the place of God, God was like, oh, let me just put you back down where you belong. Okay? Yeah. So one of the things, this is a side note, next time you go through the book of Daniel and you're reading chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4, one of the things you might want to look for is how God used the exile to bring about the salvation of the world. Okay? So Israel suffers, they go into exile, and God puts four Hebrew young men right at the heart of the kingdom, right around the king of Babylon. And it's through their influence that he eventually converts and gives his life to the true and living God. Now he's stubborn and he's kicking against the goads, and he'll have these flashes of conversion and then deconversion and then reconversion. He's struggling. He is up and down until this event. And after this, when he's finally laid low, when the Lord brings him up, he issues the decree that his whole kingdom, the whole world, must worship the God of Daniel. Okay? It's an incredible thing. And by the way, where it says, let him be wet with the dew of heaven, in the Septuagint, translating the Hebrew into Greek, it uses the word baptized. Let him be baptized with the dew of heaven. So there's even a sacramental aspect here of Nebuchadnezzar is laid low and he has to be washed like the rest of us. But that's a side note. I just want to throw a little factoid out for you. Okay. But do you see what's happening here? Like, you could look at the story of Daniel in Babylon with the king and think, oh man, this is like the worst thing ever. And even though God is present in Daniel's life, you think, well, he's just one man. Well, he is one man. And then the four young men and other faithful Jews who were scattered throughout Babylon. But in addition to that, you have all of these angelic creatures who are working. And when Nebuchadnezzar reaches the end of God's purposes for him, it's over. Time to move on to someone else. Okay? But guess who endures? While Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, they all rise and fall. Guess what always endures? God and his people. His church. Right? His church, whether it's the Old Testament church or New Testament church. And this is why Jesus says, the gates of hell will not prevail against my church. Okay? All right. So far, so good? I think someone had, were one of you going to ask a question or make a comment?
Was this little part down here about the king who was turned into a beast and had to eat for, is that Hezekiah or who's that?
Nebuchadnezzar.
Oh, it was Nebuchadnezzar?
Mhm.
Oh, I was thinking of somebody else. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So he's the one that turned into a beast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Along that same line where it said that his mind be changed by a man.
Yeah.
Change from a man's and let a beast mind be given to him. Yeah.
Let 7 periods of time pass over him. So how did that work?
So
7 years he was out there.
yeah,
He was a big beast.
yeah, for 7 years, like if we were looking at it without this knowledge of the holy ones and the watchers and all of that, we would have probably said, oh, Nebuchadnezzar suffered a mental collapse or nervous breakdown, and he's snapped, he's lost
He's
it.
an animal, yeah.
Because as you read the story, you realize his fingernails grow very long, his hair gets very long. I mean, he looks like an animal. He's living like an animal. And so this is the worst thing that can happen. And by the way, this is what sin does to us. Sin dehumanizes us. But we see it in a very graphic way in Nebuchadnezzar's life, where he is utterly dehumanized by his own pride. And in order to humble him, God turns him into a beast. He does this, by the way, it's kind of a sort of a divine sense of humor here, because Nebuchadnezzar, remember, he made images and said, everyone has to worship this image of who I am. And these images were sort of human-like, but not always. They had other elements as well. So it's like, oh, if you want to dehumanize yourself and have people worship you, let me dehumanize you. Let me show you what that's going to look and feel like. Okay? So this is, sorry about that. So that's what's happening there. He's going to be dehumanized, become like an animal. He's going to be made very low, and then he will be restored. Okay? And that's his conversion.
Daniel, was he present or not during all of this?
Who?
Daniel. Was he there when all of this was going to
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Daniel was there because Daniel actually outlives Nebuchadnezzar. So when Babylon goes down, Nebuchadnezzar's grandson comes to power, Belshazzar, and that's the story. We get the hand writing on the wall. Not handwriting, but there's a finger writing on the wall. And Daniel interprets that. That night, Babylon ends, the Medo-Persians take over, and then he ends up serving Darius, the king of the Medo-Persians. He's the one who throws Daniel into the lion's den. Daniel's an old man when he's thrown into the lion's den, by the way. So he's lived a long time. He's been in Babylon. At least Babylon captivity lasted 70 years. And then the Medes and Persians start to let people go back to their land. But Daniel stays. Okay. So he outlives. That's another example of kingdoms rise and fall, but God's people endure forever. Okay. All right.
Well, and that was Daniel. Didn't that have to do with fire at some point?
The other Hebrews were thrown in the fire.
Yeah.
And the reason we're not looking at their story is because the angel of the Lord showed up. They saw a fourth man, and it turned out to be not just your regular angel. Okay. All right. Y'all are too smart. You know too much here. So, but no, that's a really good question. Okay. Okay. We made a lot of progress, didn't we? 2 pages so far. Okay, look at page 3. We're not going to look at the first section, 2 Kings 7. That's just another example of there's no vision, but there is the sound of a great army. Okay, so that's probably a reference to those chariots and horsemen of fire coming against the Assyrians, or the Syrians. 2 Kings 21, 1-5, though, here's where things take a turn. Okay? If you know, take all the things you've learned about angels, things you already knew about angels, you put all that together, and you start to imagine, like, man, these are powerful creatures. They're glorious. They have messages. There might be a temptation to make more of them than we ought. Okay? Some people have done that. Some Christians have done that. And we want to be very careful to keep them in their place as we keep each other in our places. Well, Manasseh did not do that. The only thing I want to highlight here is the thing you learn about this man is he's 12 when he began to reign. He reigned 55 years. Okay? I turned 55 last year. So I think, man, that's a long time for someone to be reigning, especially when they're so wicked. Okay? Verse 2 says, he did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, according to the despicable practices of the nations whom the Lord drove out before the people of Israel. So he's going all the way back to what the Canaanites were doing when Israel left Egypt. He goes all the way back to that. He's trying to revive the old pagan gods, the pagan religion. That's what he's doing. He rebuilt the high places that Hezekiah, his father, had destroyed. So he's trying to undo that reformation. He erected altars for Baal and made an Asherah, which is a tall pole, as Ahab, king of Israel, had done. And Ahab was a wicked man. Remember, he was married to Jezebel, who also led him deep into that idolatry. And here it is. And who did he worship? He worshipped all the host of heaven and served them. Now, when you see this phrase, host of heaven, know that does not include the true and living God. So it's not like he worshipped God and all of the angels. There's a distinction. He worshipped the angelic creatures, the host of heaven. And given that they were in the ancient Near East, they often looked to the stars as being visible representations of that host of heaven. Okay, so this could be a reference to he worshipped the stars, he worshipped the planets, but it could also be that he worshipped angelic creatures. But in this case, they would be fallen ones. Okay, because holy ones would not have allowed that. Unholy ones would have said, "Sure, we'll help you out." Okay. Verse 4: He built altars where? In the house of the Lord, of which the Lord had said, "In Jerusalem will I put my name." And he built altars for all the hosts of heaven in the 2 courts of the house of the Lord. So in case you missed the first altar, just go to the second one. Okay. Okay. And I just wanted to highlight for you the risks when we get to our New Testament passages. We'll see how St. Paul warns us against the worship of angels, and warns us to be discerning in any messages that come from angels, because there are angelic creatures out there. The devil himself disguises himself as an angel of light. And so the angels, good and bad, will bring messages to people. The bad ones will bring you messages that sound sort of true, like you see in the garden. Did God really say? And I kind of know. Or like the devil quoting scripture, It says in Psalm 91. Well, you want to be very discerning. Paul says if an angel or a man brings a different gospel other than the one we've preached, other than apostolic teaching and tradition, let them be utterly cursed, anathema. Okay. So it does no good to say, well, an angel said salvation is by grace through faith plus navel gazing plus burning incense or whatever you add in there. No. So be very careful. Okay. 2 Chronicles 18, this is at the top of page 4. So what's happening here is there is a war. Israel is already divided between northern and southern kingdoms, but the two kings have come together to form an alliance so that they can defend against these enemies that are attacking their lands. And one king says to another, is there a prophet around here that we can inquire of? And then one king says, yeah, we got a prophet. He's in jail, by the way, but I don't like him because he never says anything good about me. So this king only wants prophets that tickle his ears and tell him what he wants to hear. The other king insists, we need to hear from God. Let's inquire of the Lord. So reluctantly, they bring Micaiah the prophet up. And after some banter in which Micaiah starts out by telling the king exactly what he wants to hear, and that king knows that can't be true, he says, no, you got to tell us the truth. And so he says, all right, I'll tell you the truth. And that's what we have here. Okay. Micaiah says, hear the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne, and all the host of heaven standing on his right and on his left. It's quite a vision, isn't it? Okay. I mean, this rivals Isaiah's vision because he sees what Isaiah saw, but he sees even more, doesn't he? And the Lord said, who will entice Ahab, the king of Israel, that he may go up and fall at Ramoth Gilead? And one said one thing, and another said another. And so here he's talking about the host, different creatures, different angelic creatures. One says one thing, one says another. So this is an image of the divine council where there's dialogue. The Lord asks a question. He expects the angelic host to respond, and they do. And what are they doing? They're offering up ideas. We could do this, or I could do that. Okay. And I just love that little detail about things happening in heaven. The Lord knows what he's going to do, but he's relational, and you have this participatory life with him. Jesus will do this kind of thing. What shall we do? These people are hungry. I wonder, what can we do to feed them? And then the disciples are like, well, we have some bad ideas, but here they are. Okay. So one says one thing, one says another. And then, out of this host, a spirit came forward and stood before the Lord, saying, I will entice him. And the Lord said to him, by what means? And he said, I will go out and will be a lying spirit in the mouth of all his prophets. And he said, you are to entice him, and you shall succeed. Go out and do so. Now therefore, behold, the Lord has put a lying spirit in the mouth of these your prophets. The Lord has declared disaster concerning you. Then Zedekiah, the son of Chenaanah, came near and struck Micaiah on the cheek and said, which way did the Spirit of the Lord go from me to speak to you? So he's mocking him, right? Now, I want you to think about this story, right? It might take more than a few minutes, so later in the day you think about what's happening here. But in the midst of all this dialogue, one of these angelic creatures offers to go to be the one that will entice the king into war so that the king will be killed. But in order to do that, he has to become a lying spirit in the mouth of his prophets. What are your impressions of that? What do you think about? Does this affect the way you view God in any way?
There's so many places in Psalms where it says that God hates a lying tongue.
Yes.
So you just wonder how could God approve this?
Yes, you wonder how could God approve this sort of thing?
His plan.
Yeah.
Isn't there a better one?
The sacrifice
from that particular spirit that I'm willing to do this.
Yeah.
Was it a fallen spirit?
There's no indication that it was, but it could have been. But I don't know that a fallen spirit would have wanted to cooperate with God's purpose to bring down a wicked king. I mean, this is the deeper you go, the weirder it gets kind of story, okay? Because what do we know? What does Jesus say? I am the way, the truth, and the life. We also know that, there are some things that are impossible for God to do. Did you know that? So what is one of those things? It is impossible for God to die, but it's impossible for God to lie. The book of Hebrews says it is impossible for God to lie. So God himself does not lie. But the Spirit comes and says, I'll go and trick them. I'll trick them into this warfare. Okay? Now, I want you to look at a passage here. I didn't print it out for you, but I want to highlight something for you. In 2 Thessalonians. And I'm going to highlight this because I think it might help us understand some of the motivation behind what this story is telling us and why God might have allowed this thing to unfold the way it did. We'll come back to this passage, by the way, but suffice it to say for now, I want you to look at 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. This is in the context of talking about the man of lawlessness or the evil one, the unrighteous one. And if you go towards the end, let's see, verse 9, look at verses 8 and 9, okay? Chapter 2, 2 Thessalonians 2. So verse 8 talks about the lawless one who is going to be revealed. Jesus will take him out with the breath of his mouth and bring him to nothing by the appearance of his coming. But verse 9 talks about the coming of the lawless one. It says, the coming of the lawless one is by the activity of Satan with all power and false signs and wonders, and with all wicked deception for those who are perishing. Because, why? They refuse to love the truth and so be saved. So you see, God's sovereignty is at work here. There's demonic activity at work, but there's also human responsibility involved in this. So you have people who refuse to love the truth and so be saved. But there are other forces besides the gospel being preached and God's word being read. Remember, it says the activity of Satan. There's power, false signs, and wonders. Okay? So again, we're talking about all this spiritual struggle and warfare. Now, look at verse 11. Therefore, God does what? God sends them a strong delusion. Why? So that they will believe what is false. And verse 12 says why. It explains even further. In order that all may be condemned who did not believe the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. In other words, this is a way that God will affirm someone in their unbelief, in their rejection of the truth. Oh, you've rejected the truth? You don't want my son? You hate the gospel? You prefer lies and false wonders and other demonic messages? I'm going to give you what you want. Okay? Yeah. So think about that. In other words, God doesn't sit around wringing his hands saying, oh, I just wish I could do something to change their minds. He's like, I've given you everything I could give you. And you don't want any of it. So let me give you what you really want. And let me make sure that you really get what you've asked for. Okay? This is just a deeper way of Paul explaining what he does in Romans 1 by saying God hands them over to their own passions and pleasures. God hands them over to their own desires. In other words, God respects the decisions we make. Okay? Now, this passage, coupled with the one we read in 2 Chronicles, used to keep me up late at night. Sometimes it still does, to be honest. But the reason it does is not because I'm worried about the outcome so much, but what it does is reminds me, and I hope it reminds you, that we're dealing with a God who cannot be domesticated by us. We're dealing with a God who does not play by the same rules that we play by. He knows more, he understands more than any of us do. And so his purposes are mysterious, but he will accomplish them by a variety of means. And some of the means make us go, oh, yikes. Okay? So Paul talks about God sending them a powerful delusion. It's the same kind of thing we saw in 2 Chronicles with a lying spirit saying, I'll be this powerful delusion, right? I'll do that to bring about your purposes. Because the end of Ahab is actually going to bring relief to the people of God. Okay? So that's a mystery that's very profound. You can sit up late at night pondering it. But if nothing else, what I hope it does is I hope it deepens our fear of the Lord. Reverence and awe. Fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, right? And when we draw near to God, we ought to draw near with reverence and awe and not just assume that we're going to cozy up to the old man in the sky, as they like to say here in the South. No.
Sometimes, I know I've had a vision.
Mm-hmm.
I have. And it was when I first moved out here, and it was like from Dallas. I lived 20 years in Dallas, and been very active in the Church of the Cross, the Chapel of the Cross, and really had great respect for Father Bonzar, and talked with him a lot. And I came here, and I was still going back there, and it bothered me. And I woke up one morning kind of early. I'd been dreaming. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? I need to go to Father Vincent, but I still want to go to Father Bonzar. And, nothing wrong in this. It was just something I couldn't bring myself to go and talk to Father Vincent about things that I needed to hear. And I woke up and I sat on the side of the bed and I started praying to God, to give me an answer. Who do I go to? And in a minute, there was something going on over here. And I turned my head and looked, and I guess that was a vision. I don't know. But what I saw was me getting out of my car at the Chapel of the Cross, going up to the door and putting the key in. And I thought, I sort of came out of it, and I thought, I don't have the key anymore. I returned it. And then I thought, oh, God is telling me to go talk to Father Bonzar, and he's going to help me to do what I need to do.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what happened. And he said, Father Vincent is your priest now. And it's hard for you to turn loose.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Yeah.
So we can do that.
We can.
have visions.
Well, thank you all for sharing today. I'm going to leave the rest for you to reflect on. They're just passages from the Psalms. And I don't mean to slight them in any way by saying that, but I'm saying they're just passages from the Psalms. No, I just mean we moved out of the narratives into the more poetry. But I think you'll see more of the same, and it'll give you details about some of the stories we read, and then some of the things we'll look at going into the New Testament. So Was it helpful to have a printout?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I'll do that. I'll
Large fonts.
yeah. I'll do that again for next week. I'll also send it. I'll try to get it to you a little earlier in case you want to read over it or print it out on your own. You can do that as well. But I'll bring copies next week. We're going to look at some things in the New Testament. Our focus will be on angels in the life of Jesus. Okay, I want us to do that. We'll also look at angels in the life of the church, and so.
I hate to ask you to
Yep.
do this, but can we get copies of the other two times?
Print out. I can make it for you. It's not that difficult. Sure. Okay. And real quick before we go, is everyone that wants to receive the email with the links, are you getting that? If you're not getting it, you didn't get last week's? Okay. Okay. I'll make sure you get that. Okay. Because just know we usually send it out Thursday or Friday. And if you're not getting it and you would like to get it, let me know because I want to make sure you have it. And then you can get all of them.
I was going to say the transcription, if you click on the link, it gives you everything there.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
I was redoing it, I didn't want to go through everything. I just read it, 'cause I could read it faster than I could.
Yeah, that's great. So if you use YouTube, as you pointed out, it will transcribe everything. So everything it hears, and so it'll transcribe. You can read a transcript of the class if you don't want to take the time to listen again. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you all for being here today. Thank you for sharing your stories. That was amazing. Let me pray for us and we'll dismiss. Father, we're so thankful that you love us and demonstrate your love for us in Jesus, and that you have shared the grace and truth of the gospel with us. The Spirit dwells in us, sealing us for the day of redemption and crying out, Abba, Father, on our behalf, reminding us that we are your sons and daughters. And we're also grateful that you have appointed the angels to come around and serve us, to tend and take care of us, to help us in our time of need. And I pray that as we go out into the darkness of this world, with enemies surrounding us at every side, that we'll remember that you are present and that your angels are with us, and there are more with us than are with them. So give us eyes to see and hearts to feel and souls to believe all the truth that you've given us in Jesus our Savior. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. So good.